Welcome to the Pulpit and Porch, previously known as the Small Church Podcast. I'm Tony Marr, and with me is my friend Robert Kell.
Hey everyone, we're glad you're here. The Pulpit and Porch is where we kick back, put up our feet, and talk about real life stuff of ministry, faith, community, and maybe a little sports and pop culture.
Yeah, if you're expecting a perfectly polished sermon, you're probably in the wrong place.
We're more about those honest heart-to-heart conversations, like the ones you'd have on the front porch with friends. Sometimes we stay on track, and sometimes we take the scenic route.
That's half the fun, isn't it? Here we tackle the highs, the lows, and the in-betweens of church and of life. Every now and then, we'll welcome a few friends to the front porch and share stories and ideas that might just change the way that you see things.
So whether you're a pastor, a church leader, or just someone who loves the church, pull up a chair, grab some sweet tea, and let's dive in. Welcome to the Pulpit and Porch. We've got a seat waiting for you. Yo.
Good morning.
There's no way that outside of being alive, you think it's a good morning today.
It is a good morning today. It's a great morning. We're in the warmth.
We are in the warmth.
Semi-warmth.
But it is not warm outside. It is single digits, has been for about 3 days now. And what's hilarious is, like, I should have taken a picture before I left and texted it to you. Our entire neighborhood is still white. The only thing that is not covered in snow is the road and people's driveways, of course. But like, and some of those are, but like where, you and I live about 20 minutes apart, but it's only like 5 miles or something. It just takes forever to get from point A to point B with traffic speeds and traffic lights and all that stuff. But when it snows, typically where I live, people would assume in our area that I'm not going to get a whole lot of snow and that you're going to get 2.5 feet and you're going to be like, this is the bane of my existence. And I'm going to be crying kind of, this is, I want snow. But like, we were at your house Sunday night, I guess, and we were leaving and I was going, it's fine. There's no snow at Tony's. And then we get home and like Brody was holding Melissa up. Like, they got out of the same side of the van and Colby and I were on the other side of the van. We parked in like a flat part of the driveway. We've got a neighbor who has a driveway they don't use, and they let us park there occasionally with stuff like this. And so we parked up in this flat part of the driveway. And like, I'm glad I didn't, because I would have literally slid all the way down our driveway into my van. Like, I wouldn't have been able to have stopped. Like, the driveways were covered in ice. Wow. It was crazy. I'm going, it's like, again, a 15-minute drive, 20 minutes maybe max. And it felt like two different worlds kind of doing that. But yeah, so, and it's been so cold and not really a ton of sun. Everything's just frozen. And so it is still, the entire ground's covered in snow.
And we want to send a special prayer out to our friends in the South, that our listeners in the South that are not used to this kind of weather. And their New Orleans got 8 inches yesterday, it tripled their daily record for snow in a day.
We've got some friends in Louisiana, friends in Florida, and I'm just dumbfounded that, like, in Fort Walton Beach and, like you said, New Orleans, I think our friends are like in central Louisiana, which I don't think is too far from like Louisiana State's campus, LSU's campus and stuff. But that's crazy that 8 inches of snow, 7 inches of snow. I'm like they have more snow than we do here.
Yeah, we have a place in North Myrtle Beach, and my wife was showing me videos and pictures last night that it was a blizzard there last night. I mean, inches upon inches on the roads there. And they're not used to that, and so they don't have the infrastructure in place to take care of that.
And that's always the thing, is that it's not that, because in today's world where we all move and we live different places. I mean, you're a West Coast guy that's lived here for 20 some years now. And I mean, so we move, we end up landing different places and things, but yeah, so many people, like, it's not that people can't drive, but when the city or the town, the state cannot handle the weather that comes to them, nobody can drive in a lot of those moments. And so, yeah, it's really kind of crazy and a little bit scary.
And we've seen this a lot this year, of regions being hit with weather that they're not used to and therefore not prepared for. We experienced it with the flooding a few months ago here. And seeing the ramifications of that, and now the response in a bridge that's being rebuilt a mile down the road from where we're at right now, and the way that they're doing things now to prepare for the event that could happen in the future, taking those precautions and assessments now to make sure that we're prepared better in the future.
And I'm torn. Do we want to use that and transition and say, and that's kind of like our continued topic today, or do we want to talk about how the Dodgers are ruining baseball?
Are the Dodgers ruining baseball, or are the other 29 owners in Major League Baseball ruining baseball?
I don't think that's a fair assessment. Like, that's not, I mean, I'm sure a lot of these guys would love, but, and again,
not if they're not going to spend. If they won't spend the money.
Some of them don't have it. I mean, and you can balance that and argue that however you want, but I mean, there's small market teams that just don't have those resources to compete. And so I don't think the Braves are one of those. I think that they tend to build a cheap team. I think that we were fortunate, and I hate it for them. I wish they would have held out. They wouldn't be with us, but they deserve it. I think Acuna and Albies both deserve triple what they're getting. And could you imagine what Juan Soto would have just gotten if Ronald wouldn't have signed a deal almost out of fear? I started to say deal and fear at the same time, like almost out of fear, and took significantly less. But he and Ozzy both kind of, I feel like, this is totally my opinion. They did not text me or call me about this, contrary to everybody's belief that I'm deeply connected to the ownership of the Braves. But by the way, nobody believes that. But it's that whole idea, and I think that's a hard thing. I mean, like, he literally, Juan might have gotten $1 billion deal if Ronald would have gotten probably what he deserved a year ago, 2 years ago. If he'd have held out and re-signed a year ago and the Braves would have paid him, he would have probably been a $600 million guy. And Juan Soto, with the Mets, Yankees, people like that arguing over him, would have become $1 billion player.
Yeah, I think there's so much to be said for culture, and you could apply the same to the church world. But you look at just two of the big signings that the Dodgers had in the last week or two, took significantly less money to be with the Dodgers than what they were offered from other teams because they wanted to be a part of that culture.
Well, they want to be a part. They want a chance to win. I think, and like, I'm not saying the Dodgers have a bad culture. I don't think they do. I think it's a fine culture. I think people want to win. And like, I think the Jets are a prime example of that this year. People took a little bit less money, or they shifted their whole world, or they moved because they're like, hey, if we can align the stars here, they had a pretty good defense. We'll get Aaron Rodgers. And the last couple of years have shown that, I mean, it doesn't always work just with talent. And so I'm not saying the Dodgers have bad culture, but people move to win anymore. They want to win.
I feel like the Dodger organization prides themselves on the character of their players and their coaches and their personnel. You look at the San Diego Padres, who I would say were perhaps a better team than the Dodgers last year. I thought that we would have a very difficult time getting past them in the National League playoffs. And I mean, it went 5 games, but I was really concerned about our ability to beat them. I think on paper, they were a better team than us. Their pitching staff was definitely a better team than ours. And you look at just Roki Sasaki, who was the big free agent pitcher of this offseason. He was offered $4 million a year more by the Padres. His mentor and best friend in the United States plays for the Padres, and yet he chose to take $4 million a year less to come to the Dodgers because of the culture of the Dodgers. The Padres organization is known for infighting in their dugout. They're seen with turmoil. Their management doesn't take care of their players and show the same kind of loyalty to their players that the Dodgers organization has shown over the years. And I think that players take great pride in that and being a part of an organization like that. And I think that it's something that the players look for when they're making those decisions, that it's not all about money. And so when I hear the narrative, and granted, the Dodgers have spent going into the 2025 season, $70 million more than the next highest team. But last year when we won the World Series, we were number 4 in payroll. So there were 3 teams that we beat for a World Series title that had a higher payroll than we do. What we've done this offseason.
I watched 2 videos a day that
ridiculous.
said you all were the 6th team that had the highest payroll in baseball to ever win a World Series in 2025.
We did not have the highest payroll in baseball last year.
You and I have talked about
the Mets
this.
had a higher payroll than us. The Phillies had a higher payroll than us. And I think there was another team that had a higher payroll than us last year.
But literally, I was watching like 2 videos today, and they were talking about payrolls and stuff like that. But
now this upcoming season, we will, unless there's major spending that happens in the next 3 days.
And they have to be the Yankees
or the Mets.
Yeah, I don't know who they would go pick up. I don't know who's out there that would be in a role they need.
Pete Alonso still hasn't been signed.
That's true. They could. Yeah, it'd be a lot. I think the Padres, to use the analogy just using, they are the Jets of Major League Baseball. I mean, they're an absolute dumpster fire. They've never won a World Series. They perennially put themselves in a good spot. Occasionally they have a good season, but you look around the field, incredible talent. I just went blank on shortstop, right fielder. He bounces between the 2 positions. Played right field more last year. It just came back from
Fernando Tatis.
Yeah,
Junior.
He just came back from a suspension. I mean, he's just constantly been in that spot. I'm going to forget their entire team right now. I can see their faces. Their third baseman,
Johnny Hustle, Manny Machado.
Yeah, I mean,
probably my least favorite player in baseball.
Not anything that just a terrible human, but not dug out. I don't
debatable.
I don't see a ton about him pop up, and that's part of the problem. He's probably the second highest. I take pitchers out of the equation. He's probably the second highest paid position player on that team, and you never hear his name. It's just one of those deals of, except typically he botches a play or he strikes out in a big moment, or he wins a ton of. He's a great regular season guy, but can't execute in the playoffs. It's a lot of the Lamar Jackson conversation. It's potentially going to be the Josh Allen conversation this week.
Manny Machado's no Trevor Bauer, but he's also not an upstanding citizen or teammate.
True. And so I just think that those guys, when you look at it, it feels a lot almost like locker room of the Cowboys with execution of the Jets. That's what they feel like to me. They could come out because they have Aaron Rodgers, because they have Devontae Smith, because Devontae Adams, sorry. Because they have an unbelievable defense, because they have those things, they can always come out and be a world beater and just take you down. I don't know, just my opinion. I think that the Dodgers definitely, Mookie Betts, high character guy. I feel the same way about Freddie Freeman. I think he got a bad rap coming out of leaving Atlanta for some things. I don't know that he and Acuna had the best relationship, but honestly, family fight, and sometimes you get a chance to change families.
And I think that it's really interesting from a Braves fan's perspective of hearing your thoughts on Freddie Freeman leaving, because from the Dodgers side of things and everything that we heard out of Freddie, he was devastated to leave Atlanta. He did not want to leave Atlanta. He wanted to stay, and they didn't offer him a contract extension or a new contract. And so
they definitely didn't offer him what he wanted. And I've heard 2 or 3 sides of that.
Well, then they made the trade for another first baseman, for Matt Olson, right? While Freddie was still a free agent, they brought in another first baseman, and that really signified to Freddie, you're not coming back.
Yeah, he wasn't coming back. There was some conversation, and I don't know. There's some stuff where even Freddie's agent came out after a while and was just saying like, "Hey, I don't, Freddie, this wasn't some because
then Freddie fired his agent for it.
There was accusations that the agent had withheld information." And so I don't had not told Freddie about some stuff the way he should have because he knew he could get more money from the Dodgers. And so he was looking for his cut, not for Freddie.
Yeah.
And so maybe Freddie was still been in Atlanta. I have no clue. There's a lot of moving pieces there. Regardless of how it happened, people move, teams make bad decisions, churches make bad decisions, organizations make bad decisions, and you move on.
Bruce used to talk about the comparison between ministry and sports all the time. It's one of the reasons why he loved his role that he played for several years as a state director of FCA in Ohio, because he saw such similarities between the ministry and the sports world. And your parallel that you just made, connection that you made between ministry and sports, I think is pretty spot on with a lot of things there. Which, speaking of Bruce, congratulations are in hand for his Ohio State Buckeyes. I know that he would be thrilled about that.
I was pulling ish for them. I found myself at the end of the game going, maybe they can drag this out. It would be fine. Go, yeah.
I'm not a Buckeyes fan, but I'm definitely not a Fighting Irish fan, being a USC Trojans fan. And that call that Ryan Day made, or maybe it was Chip Kelly who made it as the offensive coordinator, to throw a bomb on 3rd and 6 or whatever with the national championship on the line, was a gutsy call but it paid off.
Yeah. If they don't execute that, I mean, you trust the receiver, but can the quarterback complete that in that moment, in that spot? Yeah, that was a big deal.
So we have the NFL playoffs continuing this weekend.
Yeah, we do.
We've got the AFC and NFC championship games coming up. We're time stamping ourselves a little bit here. Who are you pulling for? Who do you want to see in the big dance, the big show, the Super Bowl?
As a Cowboys fan, I'm extremely torn because
you're pulling for Washington, aren't you?
My dad was a Washington fan, so I will probably pull.
You've got Washington and the Eagles going.
I know. That's what I'm
rivals.
saying. I would pull against either one of them. I always say, I'm a weird sports fan because in college sports, I would pull for an SEC team in this moment because I think recruiting and all the stuff that happens when the SEC's winning, it's more lights on them. There's just a ton of things. I would pull for an SEC team. I used to say I would be thrilled if the Giants, Eagles, and Commanders would go 0-12-4 every year. And so now I guess I got to say 0-13-4 because they added a game. But I would be thrilled. I don't even want them to beat each other. I want them to tie when they play each other. And I cannot stand any of them.
I have a few teams that I feel that way about.
Cowboys being one of them.
Are teams that you pull for.
And so I cannot stand any of those 3 teams. I will pull for the Commanders just out of, go dad type stuff. And then I would love to see Josh Allen get a shot at a Super Bowl. My goal, the dream, once the Cowboys weren't in, would have been, I'd love to see Lions Bills.
Yeah,
that would have been.
I was hoping.
Yeah,
for as well.
We talked about that the other night too. But so yeah, there we go. I wish that anyone could have beat either of the 2 teams on the NFC that are there, and I would have pulled for the Lions or the Chargers, either one. The Rams, if they would have been in that space. What about you? What are you thinking?
I'm right with you. For the sake of a good game, I think I've got to go Eagles, Bills. I think that would be the better game. I love the story of Jaden Daniels and the whole turnaround, and what they've done in 1 year is pretty remarkable, the turnaround that they've had. But I don't have a dog in the fight. But just for the sake of an entertaining, close game, love seeing what Saquon Barkley has done this season. So I think that I've got to go Eagles Bills is what I'm pulling for.
I'm pretty indifferent on that side, but I'm there. I'm going for the Bills, and they already have one penalty though, roughing the passer. It's already lodged against them. So they'll start, if they scored a touchdown, they'll still have to go to the 15-yard line from the kickoff.
So timestamp in our show again, we have a new president.
Oh, we do.
And he segueing into...
Which that part we've known about for like 2 months. So that's a pretty wide range.
He's officially in office now. And he's had quite a first 36 hours now that he's been in office. He's had some sweeping executive orders come across. And one of the big things that made headlines that I hadn't read about until I was watching the news this morning on the treadmill. And as I'm watching the news this morning, they bring up this story that directly correlates with where our conversation is going today, that President Trump announced a $500 billion investment into creating an AI infrastructure here for the United States.
But gave no real clear path, is mine. Because I didn't watch this, you did. No, like per our conversation before the show, no real clear path of what that is going to do other than, I'm air quoting, make everyone's life better.
I guess, yeah. He had 3 of the main tech giants up on stage with him, tech giants. And I mean, it's a private sector, $500 billion investment that is going to create data centers across our country. I think 20 data centers is what it's supposed to do, aiming to outpace other countries, other nations in, being the head of the AI race. We can take the head of that. Says that it's going to create more than 100,000 jobs. It will be called Stargate, this new initiative.
Starlink, you mean?
Stargate.
No, my pun there of isn't Starlink what Elon's internet service is called?
I have no idea. So it is. I'm looking at it right now from Reuters, report in Reuters, that it's going to be the joint partnership between ChatGPT's creator OpenAI, SoftBank, and Oracle.
There we go. Here's my question as we transition in, and we'll start talking about the stuff. So I saw a lot of people on both sides making posts on social media throughout the last 4 years of movement towards the election and what would happen or what wouldn't happen. And there's lots of sheeple comments like, stop being a sheep. Hey, you bunch of sheep. You're just following along. You don't have any mind of your own. You're not thinking for yourself. Would a nationwide AI bot basically that starts to control how we think, that doesn't really cause us to have to think, we just type things in and it puts information out there and we just take that information blindly and start to live by it and execute it and things like that, is that not like the worst way for us to move forward as a country, of us just blindly taking AI thoughts and going, everybody else, and here we go? And because my thoughts are, and I mean, you and I have talked about this over the last week or so, of just, I heard a pastor say recently that he was just talking. He said people come up and ask him for counseling, and it's just like, hey, pastor, I need relationship advice. And he's like, what's your favorite song? No, it's not about music. I want to talk about relationships. He's like, humor me. What's your favorite 3 songs? Oh man, I love Sabrina's new thing, and and anything by Taylor. And he's like, okay, what's your favorite TV show? Pastor, I need relationship advice. I don't need this. And he said, what's your favorite show? And you're like, oh, Love Island. And he's like, here's your relationship advice. Put something into your life that moves your life towards the things you want. Everything you're putting into your life, because I'm not saying Sabrina Carpenter's not talented. I am just saying that what she's saying is not pointing you towards Jesus, and you're struggling because you feel like you continue to date losers, but yet everything you put into your life, Taylor's a heartbreaks and, kind of going. And if you do all of those things, it leads to this place of your life is just so upside down. And that's my concern. Is AI going to start to shape us to a place that we're just taking information and it's starting to change how we think, and then we're more apt to just fall in line as opposed to move towards a path that the Father's calling us to.
I love that. That's a great segue into our discussion for today. We started this conversation last week on the role of AI in ministry, and we're going to continue it today. But before we do, we have to have a brief message from our sponsor.
Yeah, empowering churches is a big part of what Hired Ministry does. Is your church struggling to find clarity in its mission? At Hired Ministries, we're here to help pastors and church leaders like you discover your unique purpose, vision, and strategy. Whether it's coaching, consulting, or providing resources, we're passionate about equipping churches to thrive. Ready to take the next step? Visit hireministries.com and let's build a stronger church together. Thanks for our sponsor, Higher Ministries, making the pulpit and porch happen.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So let's continue this discussion on AI and talk specifically. We talked about ways that AI has been making noise in the world, especially in the context of the church.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's talk a little bit more now, transition to AI's role in faith communities. Talked at the beginning of our episode last week about some of the startling trends in AI over the course of I think we talked about the last maybe 2 years, even the last year since we did our episode in our impromptu episode on artificial intelligence, that it has really taken over. And I've noticed in watching some of my favorite sports events that it seems like almost every other commercial is something about artificial intelligence now. New company programs, new initiatives that are taking place, that AI is everywhere. It is really taking over. How is that transitioned into the church world?
Yeah, everything is so much like our app is powered to help you make better choices. And so that whole thought there. And, it's interesting. And man, we talk about so much stuff, and I know we should probably there, but you brought up like a huge leader in the church space is Kerry Newhoff, and he has launched his own AI thing that helps you with sermons. And, we were kind of looking at it and doing some things. And I just think that everyone, and that one feels a little different to me than a pastor creating an AI service to do counseling with you, or to pray with you, or to, take confession for you. That feels very different in that space. But it's just really, it is really, really deep. You and I were playing around, and some of this we're just trying to continue to go, okay, how fast is this moving? And then other things, it's like, how do we leverage it properly? How do we not do those things? And we were playing around right even before the show today, and it's just moving so quick. And a basic question, 20 seconds later, you have weeks of content that just literally changes your life. And so I think it's integrated deep, whether that is people use it as Google. So sometimes instead of somebody going, hey, what's a good sermon illustration that about this topic or this thing or this idea, it becomes more of, hey, what's this? They're using Chat GPT instead of Google for that. But then also it's the same thing of, this has probably been over a year ago that you talked about and we were talking about something in small groups, and you talked about your all's church structure at one point in time when you were the lead pastor at a church. You had one staff member that listened to your sermon, sat in a room, was watching it on an old box TV. No, I'm joking. It wasn't that far back, but but he was watching the sermon. He was listening. He had a copy of your notes, and he was writing a small group discussion guide on the fly and making that available to people after the service as they head into small groups and those types of things. And now, we literally just took my sermon from this past Sunday and said, hey, what would this look like? And we dropped it in and said, ask, write a small group discussion guide based on the following sermon. And it was less than 20, within 2 seconds, I was starting to read you really good content. Within 20 seconds, the whole thing was done, and it was like 5 points. It had kind of brought the big key points of my sermon out. It had asked questions around those things. It had like created these really neat thoughts. Then it had action steps for everybody to take for the week, and it had a prayer guide of how you could pray as a group before you closed, and even gave a closing thought. I mean, that's where we're at with the church and AI right now, and we have to find a way to not let it cripple us, but also not just ignore it, because I don't think it's all evil. I think there's good in it.
You're exactly right that there is good in it. And we've talked so much off the air about the ethical implications of artificial intelligence. And there are areas that I think are dangerous. But like you said, there are areas where it could be a huge help. What are some of the resources out there for our listeners? You educate me more on AI every single week almost. I have an app on my phone that I guess it's Microsoft's app, right?
Copilot, yeah.
Copilot that I play around with some. We'll ask it questions and it can generate stuff. I actually asked it in preparation for this. I asked it one of our questions that we're going to get to in a little bit. I typed it in on my phone to ask AI, and it gave me an answer that I'll share when we get to that later. But it was pretty remarkable how it answered and talked about itself, because I asked about the ethical issues that come with using artificial intelligence. And I'm asking this to artificial intelligence, and it gave me a pretty educated and unique response about itself and the dangers of itself, because it is artificial intelligence that I was asking about. So, but you have to always educate me on things. In fact, we had an opportunity to get a paid program for free that I'd never even heard of and was asking you about.
Yeah, that one I hadn't heard about either at that point.
But for pastors who may be listening, or leaders who may be listening to the show that are like me and they're really uneducated, we've heard of ChatGPT. I've heard of Copilot. What are some of the other resources that are out there that are available? Is it necessary to have, I know you have paid programs of AI. We were talking before we came on the air about the limitations on how many questions you can ask ChatGPT a day. And I think you said it was something like 20 with the free version. So what is necessary if you want to utilize artificial intelligence in a positive way to help you in your ministry?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the bigger things come around, and I don't know that there's a vast difference. And this is for people who are out here that are listening to this that are way more tech savvy than I am, that are going, okay, no, like there's a monster difference between Copilot and ChatGPT, or there's a big difference between Perplexity and whatever else is out there. I mean, you and I have been asking questions to 2 or 3 of these things, and we've asked the same question, and we're getting kind of the same response. Neither one of us pay for, like you mentioned, like here in the next few days or weeks, like you'll have access to one of these at a paid level for a little while for free. And so, we'll look at that and see what it does, if it provides better answers or those types of things. But the big game changers are, like Grammarly. I mean, Grammarly's it's an AI service.
I use Grammarly.
Yeah.
And what's funny is you said that, and I never considered Grammarly as artificial intelligence until you just said that.
Yeah.
I use Grammarly. I have the plugins, is that what they're called? The plugins on my browser and use it all the time.
Yeah. And so you can connect it. Can you connect it to Word, or do you copy and paste out of Word into Grammarly?
There may be a way that you can do it, but I copy and paste if I'm using something like that.
The thing that's always getting tough, more and more complicated, is all of these services are creating images. I mean, you and I, our 2 of our boys were hanging out the other day, snapping photos and video at one of your basketball games. And the whole thing is like, ultimately it's really easy to take and AI generate stuff now that is not what it used to be. Like, there's photos that I've deleted 15 years ago that I was taking that I wish I still had, because now AI can take a blurry photo, make it clear. And I had a really good photo, and a ref walked into the edge of a frame, and if the camera caught him just in a quick second, instead of what was, and I use back button focus and all kinds of stuff. Like, I do everything I can to not make that happen. But somebody would walk into a frame and the part that I wanted would be blurry. Well, now there's apps that you drop a photo into in your phone. If it's Apple doesn't do it, but the non-Apple phones do those things. But Adobe, Canva, those are things that you can take and use their AI. And when you're trying to create social media posts, if you're like me and you're even remotely creative, you can get deep in the weeds of trying to find fonts and trying to do all the things. And you can take AI. I've seen our staff, part of our teaching team, take and go in and create entire bumper videos. We were doing a series on judges, I think, and we wanted it to be almost like a little bit of a comic book thing. And they went into Canva AI and said, create a bumper video with this, and this, and certain characters out of it. Very detailed question. Unbelievable video.
But anything like that is going to require a subscription, right?
Yeah, content. But they get Canva for free if you're a nonprofit. So you get the pro version for free inside of that.
So I can tell you,
ChatGPT and all these things are free.
And maybe our listeners out there are saying, Tony, you're the biggest idiot ever. I can tell you that when we were making the transition from the Small Church podcast to the Pulpit and Porch podcast, you and I talked through that we need a new logo, all of that. You told me that Canva had these tools. I use Canva a lot for graphic design stuff. I could not find where you do that, where you help Canva do it in AI. I tried to go into ChatGPT. It told me that it could not create images with ChatGPT. So through a Google search, I found the Copilot app, and that's where I downloaded the Copilot app, and it was able to do it. And then we talked about this last week, that it didn't do a very good job of it. It couldn't spell pulpit correctly, even though I spelled it out for it right in the thing. And so
I misspelled pulpit a few weeks ago.
So I sent it to you, and you were able to clean it up and fix it, I think, using Canva. But for those of us that are not familiar and well-versed in these AI systems, they can be a little tricky. I still can't figure out the Canva AI and how that stuff works. Can't even figure out where you do it within Canva. So
there's a Dream Lab that has part of it. There's a Canva. There's several things that kind of get in there that you can do, and quick Google search can kind of show you. It's just, it's really kind of there. I don't use a lot of the AI. I'll use it a little bit in some spaces. I like to create. I feel like it's the one thing, like, I'll ask questions. I'll get help with small group guides, discussion guides. I'll drop my sermon in and ask for help with social media posts. Those are things that bog me down. I still want to create. And so I think that, like, there's things where we've got to kind of go, okay, what fuels me and what bogs me down? What's the thing when you sit down at your desk and you start to do it, you're just dreading it and you lean back and you want to take a nap? That might be something you hand off to AI. And you go, okay, what's the thing that I could do this all day? Set some time constraints, but, spend some time, actually let AI save you time and create the space that you want. I mean, you and I were talking earlier, though, the concern still has to be, how does it like, you and I look at things from AI and we process it and we start to think and we go, okay, is that accurate? Is that this? And then it challenges us and we think differently moving forward. So we don't use it as just a crutch. We use it as a propulsion, like a jetpack that moves us forward. It can't make us lazy, but I think it can definitely go from there. So just real quick, there's a thing called Otter, where you can take and auto record, and it runs it's voice to text, and it's a weird looking logo and stuff, but it's a blue logo. It's pretty cool. There's a free level to it, but it's paid. I haven't used all of these. at a really, really high level, but I was reading a post and just AI art, Runway ML, Suno, SUNO, and Gamma AI are all apps that are used at a pretty high level, and they do things like create art. I mean, they literally just make art, or they take certain thoughts and create them into a little better actionable steps that you can move through. And so those are just a bunch of different resources. There's free levels to almost all of those. And they're pretty popular inside of the people who are using AI to basically cheat the system.
One of the ways that we've talked before in the show that there's this gap between larger churches and smaller congregations is in resources, that larger churches inevitably have more to throw at resources. They have more tools available to them to help them in ministry. Do you feel like AI closes that gap a little bit?
So here's the question I would ask. Like, I would have loved, when I was making the transition so I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now. I think I'd be doing something else. But I would have loved to have been around you when I was making the shift from kind of vocational ministry as a leading a specific ministry pastor to like a creative arts. Like, something you have done really, really well is, and this is just listening, not just to you, but people around you. And you don't always know, you don't know what people are going to say about you when they're not around. And so it's just things I've heard. You are great with bringing creatives into the process. My question would be, is that, are we taking and using AI in a way to alleviate, because I will tell you, and I think you would agree with this because you're a pretty creative guy, but creatives are the worst. They are an absolute nightmare to work with. I've said this before. The ones that I was working with at different spaces, I would tell them we needed something in 4 weeks when I didn't need it until like 12 weeks because they had plenty of time to get it done in 4 weeks. They just wanted to sit and lament in their art. And if I would have told them it was 20 weeks, it would have taken them 30. So I'd tell them 4 because I knew it'd take them 9. And I needed this stuff for 3 weeks to promote what we were doing before we started. So I think the tension for me comes not from the fact of, is AI helping? Yes, I think it bridges that gap. But are we using it as an escape to where we don't have to interact with people that can sometimes make our life a little more complicated? But if we step in and we learn to communicate and have good conversation with them, they actually make our life way better, because you've still got to take what's in Chat GPT or whatever AI service you're using and execute what's there. You meet with somebody every other week for an hour over a coffee, set some parameters, put it there. Hey, be here. We're going to do this. You meet with them every other week for an hour. You've got 26 hours a year invested, and they save you 50 hours. Seems like a good investment. And I think you're building the kingdom. You're helping someone use a gift and a talent God's given them. And while technology has made it easier for creatives to get plugged into ministry, I still think it's one of the hardest positions. If you're not a guitar player that sings on stage, it's still one of the hardest gifts to have and plug in to nonprofit / church ministry things. So yes, do I think it bridges the gap? Absolutely. I think the position that it kills, because AI can't make my coffee. It probably could, but I can't afford that coffee maker if I'm a small church with a pastor and a half on staff. It can't make my coffee. It can't open the doors. It can't shake somebody's hand. It can't do all those things. So I have to have people there. Then I've still got that. And I'm just being honest, because I'm that person. I'm a pretty outgoing person. I'm not this person, but I've got a lot of friends that are. I've still got that person who struggles with social anxiety because they're just a deep, deep, deep creative that needs a space and a way for you to help them find community, to find purpose, and to find connection. What about you? Do you think it bridges that gap? Because we both led at pretty large churches, but you've led at churches way larger than me. So when you look back and then you look present, Do you think like it bridges that gap, or do you think it creates more tension? A little bit of both?
No, I definitely think it greatly bridges the gap. And for this reason, I think that it provides resources for small churches that can help them do things that they haven't done before. With larger churches, I think it just enhances things that they already have in place. It makes jobs easier, lets them do things that have already been done, right? I think that with smaller churches, it fills gaps in staffing and resources. But with larger churches, I think it's probably more likely to enhance and scale their existing systems that they already have in place.
Yeah. No, I see that 100%. And I think there's the hard thing for me sometimes when I look at that is what's the learning curve, and how much does it hurt? How much does it hurt the leadership of the church as they're trying to learn that? Does it create a tension and another gap that's there, which might be where things like Carey Nieuwhof's stuff and things really come into play, because he's very ministry focused, not like these other AI services where you have to get very specific with your questions. You know, everything Carey's doing is very ministry, sermon, like moving your ministry forward related. So
one of my fears would be, I think with the small church, it can provide help in areas that they will never be able to get help in. So some small churches will never be able to hire positions that are doing things that AI can do for them. Whereas in larger churches, I have a fear that maybe it will eliminate some positions because it can do things so much quicker and more efficient than what paid staff people are doing.
Yeah, I mean, and that's stuff that we've talked about a little bit. I mean, too, with even not just in the church world, but in society in general. Like, what's going to happen? And these are things the church needs to be aware of. Hey, how's AI affecting the church? Well, here's one way. You've got people who may have had a job yesterday that don't have one today because you said last week. I mean, in 2021, like it was like 50% of companies had some version of AI functioning in there. Now it's over 90%.
Yeah.
And so like, yeah, it's more than just how does AI affect us, and does it help us? Does it cripple us? Does it make our sermons better? Does it make our small group curriculum easier? Sure, it can, and if used the right way. But man, it's affecting the people who come and sit in the rows that maybe was a good employee and did a good job, but it was just cheaper for a company. I mean, we're not sitting here looking at 60 ingredients on the back of a Gatorade bottle instead of 3 because the makers of Gatorade sat around and went, oh, it's going to cost us twice as much money to make this a worse, more unhealthy product. They're like, we can save money. It's a lot more ingredients, not near as healthy, but we're going to save money and we're going to do this. I mean, it's all about the bottom dollar for a lot of these companies, and that's really going, and that doesn't always help and work with people. It affects people in a different way. And so, you know, understanding your congregation and the people you serve and you work with and that you're leading and shepherding are facing some real hard struggles with this as well.
So I think that leads perfectly into our next question, that what we talked last week about 2 specific examples of AI being used for spiritual guidance through a pastor in Greenville that was creating a virtual avatar, AI avatar of himself that for $50 a month, you can have pastor in your pocket. And then we looked at AI.
Seems like
Jesus
a lawsuit waiting to happen right there.
Right. Yeah. What limits should there be on this?
Oh my goodness. You know, is the question, is it limits? Are limits and parameters the same thing? I'm trying to think of.
There have to be boundaries, don't there?
That's what I'm thinking. Like, I'm. So, is it wrong? I've said this before. Pastor that really, like, somebody who really shaped my life does not take meetings unless you tell him what it's about. He's like, you don't get 6 weeks, 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 months to be angry about something and formulate an entire argument and expect me to respond in 6 seconds after you kind of throw everything out there and kind of, vomit all your content on me. And so if you won't tell him what the meeting's about, you don't get a meeting. Hey, Pastor, can I meet with you? Sure. What's it about? I'd rather not say until we get together. Then we're not meeting. So my question would be is that take this pastor who's creating the AI bot as pastor in your pocket kind of thing. Is there a part of that it could be, is the good part of that, hey, I have a church of 6,000 people. I can't meet with every person in here, but if you fill this out and you do this and you do this, it gives us the parameters we need to get you the help you need to answer the questions you've got to move in that way by a real human, by a real person, from a text message that gives you the scripture that you asked for. I mean, if you're just wanting three extra thoughts about my sermon on Sunday, I don't know that me giving an hour of my week for that is I could do a podcast in 30 minutes doing a deeper dive on my sermon. You could listen to that along with 100,000 other people. And I wouldn't have to meet with 10 people that week just to answer that same question. So that, I think there's some spaces there where it's good. The boundaries have to come into the fact of God created us for human interaction. He created us to sit with others. And I think when we move in to that space that we start to fully eliminate, which I think is what a lot of these are doing. I understand some of these things didn't work. The confessional Jesus didn't work. And I don't know what's going on fully still with this, pastor in a pocket app thing or whatever. But those are things where I think you start removing human interaction. And I think it's the one thing God designed us to do. So what about you?
So I asked Copilot this question.
Is this the one you asked? Okay.
Gave what we call in the industry a tease earlier.
Here we go.
Asked AI this question. Asked what limits should be in place for AI's involvement in spiritual guidance. Mm-hmm. So I asked AI a question about AI. And here was its answer. Spiritual guidance requires empathy, discernment, and personal connection, qualities that AI lacks. While AI can provide resources or initiate discussions, it should always point individuals back to a human leader or counselor for deeper care. For example, AI-generated sermons or devotionals should never replace the prayerful, spirit-led preparation of a pastor. AI can provide research or ideas, but not the depth or conviction that comes from personal faith and experience.
I think that's exactly
AI
what I
just
said.
answered it better than we could.
Yeah, I think that's what I just said.
I think it was what you just said.
No, and that's where I've been, and this is the stuff I continue to kind of ask you, and it's not sometimes I was sitting with a pastor yesterday, and some topics kind of came up in conversation, and I talk about I've said this on here. It was one of my big things for the show dogs have decided to come in to.
They have. I'm surprised it's taken this long. We have some work taking place outside.
So, but hold things loosely and kind of work through that space and holding things loosely and doing things in that way. And so in that, I try and not get so deep into this. I was talking with a guy yesterday, and we were just talking about some conversations and topics and societal things, and I enjoyed the conversation. And I'm like, hey, I have an opinion on these, but I'm kind of doing some long form prayerful thought on this, and I'm just holding my views loosely, and I'm giving the Spirit chance an opportunity to change. And I think that's the thing about this for me is hey, I love technology. I love all of the things. It's weird. I miss getting a DVD in the mail and watching it. Yeah. And then it's like that, you open the mailbox and it's yes,
something exciting
that
about
movie I wanted to watch. And now it's there's nothing new because I follow 5 or 6 different things on social media that are coming next week on Paramount Plus. I mean, it's, it's oh, okay, cool. So Gladiator 2 is already out on Paramount Plus, and I can watch this. I can do that. I can see this. I can see that. But there's a difference sometimes. And by the way, absolute like great movie is the new Netflix flick with Cameron Diaz and Jamie Foxx back in action.
Started to watch that last night, and it was 9:00 when we started watching it, and saw that it was a 2-hour movie, and said that's going to have to wait for another time because I'm not
so funny. Cameron Diaz has not been in a movie in 11 years.
Really?
I did not realize it had been that long. And she comes back and absolutely, in my opinion, I love a good comedy. I look at movies for what they are. I think Jamie Foxx and Cameron Diaz are fantastic. They've both done great movies throughout their year, incredibly talented people. Cameron Diaz, to me, is one of the best action actresses on, like, in Hollywood. I love her in things like Charlie's Angels, Night and Day with Tom Cruise, all that stuff. And she was fabulous in this. And so, but I love jumping in and finding a good movie. But it's just so different when you get something in the mail. And I think that's the thing about human interaction. Like, I can get ideas here, but I just love sitting with friends and going, hey, if I was going to preach on this series, tell me, what's 5 songs you think really kind of wrap around this? Like, you know, it's like I used to, well, I don't do this as much anymore with some of these things, but hey, what's an opener we could do? Like, what's a Broadway song that really connects to this thought that we could do that really just speaks to maybe a smaller portion? But if the words are good and things are good, people don't care where the song comes from. And, yeah.
Do you think there's a danger in looking at these different services that are being offered now, paid services even by people that we respect in leadership, that ministry could become transactional more than relational?
That is an incredible question that I don't know I've thought about enough. That is really good. And I think yes is the immediate response. I mean, that's part of so it's not an issue that people start businesses. Nobody cares. You want to start a business, start a business. But when everything you do becomes a side hustle, you start to kind of ask questions of, okay, you know, if you and I were more famous and we were interviewing top shelf people every week and having those, like, sure, the podcast would be bigger. There'd be more people, more things. It'd probably be the only thing we do. You know, you kind of have this and we'd probably evaluate some other stuff differently, but we'd probably start 6 more podcasts based on the conversations we have. But like, you do all of that and things, and then all of a sudden you're sitting around and you have an idea, which you and I have no shortage of. We have ideas nonstop. I think that kind of becomes this unique space of, then we take that idea and we do something with it and it becomes transactional. And then this becomes this, and everything becomes, buy my book, sign up for my service, get this subscription. Hey, don't forget to sign up for this. And then what they don't know is we have a partnership, and everybody who signs up with code Tony and Robert gets, you know, we get $7 a month out of that. I mean, there's so many things moving that you just don't know, and everything becomes transactional. Yeah, I think because if it here's the thing, and if it benefits me in a way that is not just me being the body of Christ, eventually it affects how I think about you. And if I think about you only in like, oh my goodness, I can spend 10 minutes with person number 1 and I get nothing out of it. And that's how we start. Or I can spend 10 minutes with person number 2 and they're going to sign up for these 3 services, and I start getting monthly money in. That to me is where the problem hits. And so, yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm assuming you see some of that same stuff. I mean, what's some of your thoughts around that, though?
Yeah, speaking of transactions, we do need to take a minute and pause to have a word from our show sponsor.
Woohoo!
Pastors, we know the weight of ministry can be overwhelming. That's why Hire Ministries exists, to walk alongside you. From coaching to retreats and personalized care, we're here to support your calling and remind you that you don't have to do this alone. Visit higherministries.com today and discover how we can serve you as you serve others. I think Lola the show dog wants to reach out to Higher Ministries for some help.
Yeah, they do. That would be great. We can get Lola and Kobe and Charlie. They can all just jump in there and do it. What's Charlie? Where'd that name come from?
Lola and Charlie and Lola, the kids show.
Sorry, now I'm with you.
Show.
Yeah.
Charlie and Lola.
There you go.
An English kids show.
Your kids were young when you get those dogs.
They were. Yep.
That's
all right.
good.
So here's my next question. We're about out of time for this episode, but I definitely want to get to this one. And you use this technology a lot more than I do. So you blow my mind with some of the things that it's capable of doing. And I'm anxious to dive in a little bit more. I've been making some notes on ways that I want to try to implement to make my life easier and see how it will work. But I do want to ask you this question. What theological boundaries need to be considered?
The only thing, and I have to go back kind of in this space a little bit differently and kind of start in a different place, the age of AI, like we were talking about last week from the author Jason Thatcher.
Tried to get him on the show, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. Maybe he can, I know he's busy and has a lot, and that would be amazing if he has some time, because I know he would add a ton of value, not just to our life, but to the listeners as well. But I love his book, and I love what he says in there. And the biggest thing, like, I don't think there's anything in there theologically that says we should not use computers, we should not use AI, because I'm honestly, if we want to get down to it, like using a computer and typing up a document is way easier than handwriting it. It's easier to store it. It's easier to keep up with it. All the things. It's easier. I mean, and handwriting it was a lot easier than having to go out and, bleed a goat and get, I mean, there's so many different things we do that technology improves, and everything is technology, whether it's, a rock hammer versus a real hammer versus weighted hammers, to where things leverage and hit easier and do, and nails have gotten better throughout the years. So all the technology gets better to make a better thing. The theology still, the barrier, the wall comes down to me. And it's still like we are made in the image of God. I mean, we are made in his likeness, that we are created. I mean,
it's pretty much the basis of Christian theology.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And so in that space, like when you look at why God lives in community with us. And, we look at the life and what Jesus did for God to continue that community. And then even what he provides through the Holy Spirit, that he indwells and lives in us to continue that community, for us to feel like and believe that we can shift and move and navigate those things in a way that we can usurp maybe that relationship. That to me is the theological breakdown that I see, is anytime someone's, and so I'm not going to spend time here because I just went on this rant.
Well, difference between being made in the image of God and being man-made.
Yes.
Right.
And
there's no connection to God for a computer.
Correct. And it's the quote
it's
you
the Holy
read.
Spirit working in us. That is the Holy Spirit, to my understanding, does not work through artificial intelligence.
It's the thing you just read from Copilot. It's the rant I did a few minutes ago. It's the conversation we both had around monetizing things and using that to maybe distance ourselves. It's the thing of not meeting with creatives because they can be a touch complicated. And I am one. I are one, I guess, as Jeff Foxworthy says. I are one, and I know how complicated we are. And so but I know the value I get. Like my son at Landon is so crazy talented, and he does things, and he came in the living room last night, and I was working on stuff, and it was pretty late, and we're sitting there, and he's like, "Can I bring the guitar in here?" I'm like, "No." I mean, basketball game was on, but it was almost muted, and we're just sitting there, and we're all talking, and he starts playing, and I'm just going, like, "You're stupid talented." sometimes getting to the end goal with him is a lot of work. But anytime I join a project with him or I bring him into a project, his input makes it so much better because of how God's gifted him. It's just worth the time. And I think that's the thing about everybody. Like, my life is better when I sit with the random people that come into my life. My life is better because of that. And it's exactly what we have said throughout the 2 episodes that we're doing. What we're saying now is we're made in God's image through his son. He's continued to provide a way for us to be in community connection with him. And he does that still, just like you just said, through the work of the Spirit. And I don't know how we can take and just desire to remove all of that just because of AI. Use it to help with your sermon. Use it to help with small group outlines. Use it for research, but don't use it to eliminate people.
So AI can help us to analyze Scripture, but it can't interpret Scripture.
Okay, man, I am going to disagree with that statement. Only from the perspective of AI is getting smarter every day, and it is seeing enough content that I know throughout the year. I've been using AI off and on. I use it more now. Very social media based for me. Things I've written, I drop in. Scripture that I'm using, I put in. I know where you're going. We could possibly end up spending another entire episode on what we're talking about right now, and so we won't. But I'm interested to hear your thoughts. But I actually think it can do both. I think it can start to interpret. That's the tension for me.
There's
though.
A real danger in that, though.
I'm saying that's the thing for me when I talk about us letting AI do the work of the Spirit. And we talked about that in the last episode. Like that work of the Spirit, do we get lazy? And that's the tension for me. That's where I'm always struggling with AI. Do I sit and go, man, this is hard? And God wants us to do hard things. And we go, this is hard, so I'm just going to type a quick question in, because I promise you, you could ask me a question right now and I could drop it in, and I think that AI could give you both sides of the coin you just asked.
Yeah, I struggle with that because I think that biblical interpretation and subsequent application needs to come from a mature follower of Jesus.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing is AI, you and I, so there's 2 things here. One, you're saying mature follower of Jesus, and you're talking about you and I doing the work. Daily waking up, prayer, Scripture, fasting, like all of the things that go into, discipleship, evangelism, all the things that go into being a mature believer. I'm saying that, like, I can ask that question and I can get the answer, and I can say, I want that answer. Like, what would John Calvin say about what would C.S. Lewis, what would A.W. Tozer, what would J.R.R. Tolkien say about this verse, this topic, this thing? And it starts to write those thoughts. I think you and I view mature believer very different than a generation does. Some people want input from someone who's mature, not to become mature themselves, but to have an answer.
But if we start down that road, isn't that a slippery slope from AI being a tool to being a substitute for God?
I know the devil has enough advocates of his own. It does not need me playing advocate right now. I do not agree with what I'm saying.
Maybe
I
not
agree
a substitute
with you.
for God, but a substitute for God's presence.
No, I totally agree. But here's the thing, though. If we substitute God's presence, do we not eventually substitute God?
Yeah, we do.
And I think that's the tension for me. That's the space we get to. Like, whether or not my kid fully understands Catcher in the Rye, whatever book they're reading, Huck Finn that they're reading, and they jump in and grab a AI search, I don't know that gets I mean, it helps them. They don't learn to read as well. They don't learn to process things. So yes, it does affect them down the road. But if they get the general information, like you've said before, I mean, you listen to short summaries on books almost daily, and then you go back in and read a lot of those, and you read an insane amount of books in that process. But like, no, you're 100% right. I don't know. It's a scary thing for me.
Proverbs 3 comes to mind. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all of your ways acknowledge him. And I worry that slippery slope takes us to a place of leaning on the knowledge of a computer and not on the knowledge of God. And I think my favorite biblical commentator is William Barclay.
Mm-hmm.
Right here, I've got his entire New Testament daily Bible study series right there. I use it in writing my messages more than anything else, New Testament especially. He didn't do much with the Old Testament. But I know that Barclay was a devout universalist. Okay. Mm-hmm. That comes across in a lot of his writings. And so as I'm reading Barclay, I can't just use what he says word for word. I have to prayerfully interpret what he says about the scripture based off of my own beliefs and my own connection with God, relationship with God, and my own understanding of scripture. If I just took exactly what he said, my teaching would be a whole lot different, because his universalist beliefs come across sometimes subtly, sometimes very strongly. But I have to be aware enough to understand what I'm reading and read it through a lens of relying on the Holy Spirit to help me realize, to move in my heart and in my mind and in my soul and in my spirit, to give me the understanding of what I'm reading. And my fear is that AI makes it so easy to simply just ask a question, and because it's smarter than I am, that I'm just going to take it and put it and teach it without fully understanding the ramifications of what I'm teaching.
This is the tension. Okay. Melissa and I were having this conversation, and I just said, here's the struggle I have in conversations that we have with people that we're around, like people that see me and we talk about TV, or we talk about movies, or talk about different things in media. I consume a decent amount of media. 2 or 3 things I've learned. Like I was watching Criminal Minds, and I love to get into a show and just binge it. I started realizing Criminal Minds was affecting me. It affected how I viewed people. It affected how I viewed situations, and not for the good. So I just shut the whole show off. I actually didn't watch anything for a couple of days that wasn't like a sermon or something like that. But now I've got at a point where sometimes I go, I can watch that show twice a week. And it doesn't it wasn't designed to binge. It was designed to be a show that came on once a week, and that's kind of what you get. I live in a world where but like no one knows how much I'm reading, what articles I'm looking at, what reels I'm listening to, what sermons I'm listening to during the week. And I take in a ton of content in what it means to follow Jesus. How do we honor the Father? How do we listen to the work of the Spirit? Like, I listen to these things and I do this. And this goes back to the thing I was saying a minute ago about, oh, hey, I want advice about this, but I don't want to look at the things I'm ingesting. And Melissa and I have conversations about, hey, how do we continue to lead our boys in a way that they're willing to address the fact of, well, Dad, you watch that same show with us. Yeah, but I also watched 3 sermons that morning. I also prepped a sermon. I read 100 verses. I read 4 commentary sets on those verses. I did this and this and this and this and this. What did you do? No, this isn't me better than you. It's what did you do to equip yourself? And that's the tension for me, is you and I, and I'm not saying that we're ancient, but you and I being old, we had to develop skill sets, abilities, and talents in a time where we had to go to an encyclopedia, or the World Book, as you called it, and dig up stuff in a library, because we couldn't just go to a computer and open up that same book and read it really quickly and print off the 3 pages we wanted. We had to use the card catalog. We had to learn to do hard work, boring work, exhausting work, which led us to a place that now that those things are here, I don't trust this because I'm like, this should be harder. And then I go, okay, where am I being a grumpy old man? And where am I being a grumpy old man? And where am I being a good steward of what God has given so that I'm doing the work of spiritual growth? And I think that's the thing for me. So I agree with what you're saying.
That's the question.
And that's the thing for me is that you and I look at things differently. We're not just taking it blindly. I'm looking through that. I'm in the same boat. Like buddies will hand me books. I love reading them. And I'll be like, my buddy's like, hey, what's thinking about the book? And I'm like, I'm a couple chapters in. He's pretty reformed. And they're like, how do you know he's reformed? He doesn't say that. And I'm like, because I can read.
Yeah.
Because I understand what he's saying. I'm like, man, I said I love the book. Just because I'm not reformed doesn't mean that like I disagree with everything he's saying. But I need you to know, like when I read that, there's buzzwords that people say because I've done the work. I understand this isn't some blind, just turning pages through a book. I understand what the scriptures say. I've done this work. I've put in this time. I've developed my faith with fear and trembling, which I continue to do. And I'm not mad. This isn't a slam on this author that apparently is your father. And I was unaware of this, which they don't even know the guy. It's just a book they like. I'm like, I'm reading it through a different lens. And I think that's something that's hard for people to do.
Yeah.
And it's why we can't have conversations anymore. If you don't agree with me, you're an idiot. And I'm like, man, that can't be the way we approach things. And it's become so complicated in that. So,
you probably hear the music in the background.
I do hear some music.
I went to the JesusAI.com and am greeted by a light going down a tunnel that then leads you to a page that has floating clouds and this nice music playing in the background that is reminiscent of the last 30 seconds of a sermon when the worship team has come up on stage in the 90s and waiting to wrap it up and go into the invitation time. And to me, this is terrifying that this web page, you can ask it any question and it gives you prompts. My child, ask me about life, faith, and love. And it acts as if you are communicating with Jesus. And so you can ask it questions. How can I find peace in troubled times? How can I forgive those who have wronged me? Great questions that we would love answers for. But my fear is that the more that this progresses, that rather than going to our knees and connecting directly with the Holy Spirit, with the Father, with Jesus, it'll be easier to come to Jesus AI and ask the questions and get immediate answers from a AI-generated computer system rather than relying on the Holy Spirit to move and work within us.
And I just, I think about the prodigal son. I think about just stories like that the father is waiting and he's working and he's doing. And I just, if there comes a point in time that we feel like we're getting answers, and that's what's scary. If we think we're getting answers and we think we're getting solutions, but we're getting a fake Jesus, it really does. It moves us further away. In that moment, we become blind to what he's doing. Hey, one last word before you get a conclusion here. Every church has a unique story, and at Higher Ministries, we're here to help you tell yours, from leadership coaching to resources tailored for small and large congregations alike. We're passionate about seeing churches flourish. Let's grow your ministry together. Learn more at higherministries.com. And I think, like that resource there, people jumping in, higherministries.com, being able to do that. I know that that what Higher Ministries has provided has been a help to me. It's been a help to a lot of pastors throughout the years. And I think that in this moment, like as people are having questions and conversations, I mean, that's why Higher Ministries is there. It's there to help people navigate whether it's questions like this, or how do they start to embrace and, change their small group culture, or, create a stronger staff unity. Those solutions are there. And I think there's probably a lot more questions than solutions to the AI conversation we're having right now, but it's definitely a big deal.
So I think for both of us, we would say bottom line and wrapping this thing up, a couple hours of a discussion on artificial intelligence and faith communities. I think the bottom line is it's a tool. It can be a very beneficial tool. It can be a very useful tool, but don't mistake it for what it is. It's a tool.
Yeah.
It cannot replace human interaction. It cannot replace a connection with the Holy Spirit. It cannot replace the work of God in people's lives personally, and it cannot change the fact that we are created in the image of God, not in the image of a computer.
No, I agree 100%. And I don't have anything, like, I have rambled and ranted and given my grumpy old man get off my lawn speech for, definitely my part of this 2-hour journey. And I think it's a great way to end it.
And that is a great way to end this discussion on artificial intelligence in the church. We want to thank you for listening, for tuning in. We want to encourage you to continue to listen. Next week, we'll have a brand new episode every Tuesday at 6 a.m. You can find the Pulpit and Porch podcast wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. It be that on Spotify, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, iHeartRadio, wherever you want to listen to your podcasts, you can find us, like us, subscribe to us. In fact, why not subscribe to us on all the different channels? That'll help other people find us better. The more that you like and the more that you share our show, the more that people can be a part of this conversation. We want to encourage you to be a part of this discussion, this conversation on AI and everything else that we talk about on the Pulpit and Porch podcast. And you can do that by finding us on Facebook, Instagram, other social media platforms at the Pulpit and Porch. So be sure to do that. Subscribe and like to us on those social media platforms and join us in the conversation. Again, we want to thank Higher Ministries for their sponsorship of the show. This wouldn't be possible without them. Have a great rest of your week.